Welcome back to the Racial Draft Podcast, where we change the complexion of the comic book universe, one draft pick at a time. I am your host, Michael Ford, with the final round of the season 8 Racial Draft, where we, do our thing. We do our thing. Hopefully, you've been following along. If this is your first episode, I apologize, but we are doing this race bending, race solidifying adventure that is the racial draft, where there are delegations, 10 of them, and they go pick by pick, picking characters to either hold on to or bring into the fold and reimagine with different racial and ethnic backgrounds. Let's dive right in. So the first pick of the 12th round, 12th and final round, we start with the Polynesian delegation. This is a character that hasn't been around very long, but has been traditionally depicted as white. So, it's a little bit of change. The Polynesian delegation drafted Bailey Briggs, aka Spider Boy. I've read a few comics with Spider Boy in them, Bailey Briggs. I don't know a lot about him, so I don't know exactly what the Polynesian delegation could do in order to imbue the character with more racial identity, than just the standard white. Obviously, he's been just up to this point depicted with red hair and freckles, which are definitely white signifiers. But I'm looking forward to finding out whether there's more to the story and whether there's room for the reimagining. The people are a little bit mixed on it, which is, tends to happen sometimes. 66.6% approval rating for Polynesian Spider Boy. That's 33.3 strongly approve, 33.3% somewhat approve, and 33.3% somewhat disapprove. Moving on from that character to a character that has definitely been around for a lot longer, which sometimes presents some obstacles in terms of the reimagining. I would say in this instance, we're dealing with a character in Nathan Summers, aka Cable. He's the son of two mutants, and he's been traditionally depicted as white as well. In this instance, we're dealing with a character that in our current season was his father, Cyclops, Scott Summers, was drafted by the Black delegation, and his mother, Jean Grey, was drafted by the Polynesian delegation. So naturally, the Latin delegation would go ahead and draft him, so to speak. So that is part of the challenge for this season. Often, when you're dealing with the children of a character, you want to circle that square that circle. It's probably the best way of saying that. However, inside the Latin delegation, they traded for the character earlier in the season, and then they traded for him for the dynasty rights, and then they went ahead and drafted him in the main season draft. As far as I would love to hear the ways in which the Latin delegation would like to square that circle and imbue the character with Latin American or Latino identity. As of now, they have only picked a fan cast, B. Pardo, who's on the young side, for being honest, in terms of how we particularly think of Abel. He was chosen as the fan cast. One thing that we do, mentioned before, but I'll mention it again. We allow the voters, we allow the listeners to cast their votes as far as how they approve. Like I mentioned before, Daily Briggs had a 66% approval rating. And where can you vote? Well, you can vote on Threads within 24 hours of the pick. You can vote on Twitter for the first week of the pick, and on Instagram and on racialdraft.com. These polls are open for the entire season. So get on in there, go to especially racialdraft.com. Get on in there, look at the old past picks, and vote and decide how you approve of these picks. In the instance of Latino Cable, 80% approval rating for Summers as a Latino. A little bit on my side, as far as the fan cast of JD Pardo, only 74% approval rating, but still, not too bad, not too bad. And yeah, so that is Latino Cable. I got a lot to say, but except for the approval. The next pick from the Jewish delegation is the character that has already been, in a manner of speaking, racially drafted, but in a manner of speaking a little bit not. And we're talking about Intessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, the heiress, generally of European origin, spy, typically on the same level as Nick Fury, often love interest from Nick Fury. But we've also seen her in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, portrayed by Julie Louis-Dreyfus, who herself is Jewish. So, I would say that the Jewish delegation did easy enough work, drafting her over from the Dynasty Draft. We're going to see her next in the Thunderbolts movie, which is going to be dropping in the spring. And yes, so the Jewish delegation went ahead and drafted the character. They got a 100% approval rating for Jewish Valentina, 66.7 strongly approve and 33.3 somewhat approve. As far as the fan cast, this was surprising, because a lot of people like Julia Louis-Dreyfus and they've liked her performance so far. But the people who voted in the polls only gave her a 75% approval rating. 50% strongly approve, 25% somewhat approve, and 25% somewhat disapprove of the Julia Louis-Dreyfus fan cast. Moving on from the Jewish delegation to the South Asian delegation, this is a character that was drafted as part of their dynasty draft of the last season, and they drafted her over. Because she's been showing up a lot lately. Actually, she had a major role with Creature Commandos. He's been a major character in the Wonder Woman run, a major part, generally, of the Wonder Woman supporting cast, sometimes rogue, typically rogue. But in this absolute Wonder Woman run, she's actually been on Wonder Woman's side. And this character is Cersei. Cersei, who was portrayed in animation, or at least voiced in animation by Anya Chalotra. And one of the things that we know about James Gunn's MCU is that typically the actors who portray them in animated form will be portraying them in live action. So the South Asian delegation went ahead and completed that transaction, so to speak. So as far as the thing of South Asian Cersei, 100% approval rating. And as far as the fan cast of Anya Chalotra, also 100% approval rating, with 92.3% strongly approve and only 7.7 somewhat approve. I mean, we can talk a little bit about Cersei being a character that does come from mythology. But I would say that the proximity of South Asia to Greece does allow for some of the maybe Orientalist elements of, her as a temptress witch in these legends kind of work. So yeah, I mean, so that's Cersei for the South Asian delegation. Top marks for them. We move on to another character that really shouldn't be that controversial, but another character that we'll see again in the Thunderbolts film this spring. The White Delegation went ahead and brought in a character, Robert Reynolds, aka Sentry, who generally has been historically depicted as white. There's not a lot of reason, to imagine. I mean, I know that there was a moment in there where people thought that Stephen Young would be playing him. That ended up falling through, and they went right back to a white guy depicting Sentry. So perhaps this is why the character only got an 80% approval rating. Maybe some residual, not concern, but residual regret, we'll say, of this character not being race bent, but staying within the fold of the white delegation. So yeah, 80% strongly approved, 20% somewhat approve, and 20% somewhat disapprove. With respect to the fan cast, well, they kept it simple. They stuck with Lewis Pullman, the actor that's going to be playing him in the Thunderbolts movie. We've already seen him in some trailers. And that's seven, and so he got a 100% approval rating. 96.9% strongly approve and 23.1 somewhat approve. So approval on that front. And once again, you can vote in all the regular places, RacialDraft.com and Instagram, as of now, because these polls close in the other places. But make your voice known one way or the other. Moving on to another defensive pick, and this comes from the East-Southeast Asian delegation, where this character has fallen in favor. Hasn't shown up in the movies for a long while, hasn't gotten a Other years he's gotten his own solo, but he's currently without a solo run, and that is Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi, traditionally East Asian, particularly Chinese, and he's obviously played by um, obviously been played by Simu, and went ahead and stayed within the lines, so to speak. 100% approval rating, and all 100% strongly approve of East Asian Shang-Chi. With respect to the fan cast, also 100% approval rating for sticking with Simu. 75% strongly approve, and 25% somewhat approve, but still 100%. So I'm just across the board for East Asian Shang-Chi. Moving on, quickly, I suppose we're going through this round fairly with some speed. But this is one of the only non-defensive picks, or at least non-picks that have been picked before. And this comes from our friends of the multiracial delegation. As I often say, the skeleton crew delegation. This is a character that has been getting a lot of a push lately. Not a major push. He's not an A-list character by any stretch of the imagination. He's I would say that there's a version of this character that made his way into the Watchmen story that is much more mainstream, much more popular than he is. I'm talking, of course, about Captain Atom, and the Watchmen variation of him would be Doctor Manhattan. But as like I said, Doctor Manhattan much more mainstream, but Captain Atom is often along the same lines. He's a war hero who was framed for a crime, and because of that, was subjected to an experimental atomic um, experiment, experimental experiment. I know he's ultra powerful character with borderline godlike abilities, but still kind of a soldier at heart. And I would imagine that makes him a little bit less compelling. But what they've sort of leaned into with the character more recently is the extent to which there's some PTSD elements of that. And I think that one of the advantages of making him multiracial is that he's supposedly a Vietnam War veteran. And that's one of the wars where PTSD for particularly the soldiers of African American descent went untreated, and played a major role in how the veterans of that war struggled to reintegrate. I would say that multiracial, having have as many military people are, trying to navigate the different worlds of what it means to have a racial identity, but maybe also be seen as a soldier first. And I think there's a particular struggle with a multiracial character, one who has both black and white ancestry. So I do think that there's room for that kind of reimagining with Captain Atom that is not present if he's only white. And for that reason, shockingly, 100% approval rating for multiracial Captain Atom. 57.1 strongly approved, 42.3 somewhat approved of multiracial Captain Atom. With respect to the fan cast, Daniel Sunjata, who you might know from one of I can't remember which of the shows, the Chicago shows that are on NBC. He's again an actor of mixed white and black heritage. Typically, I would say definitely kind of looks the part in terms of physicality for the role, but not quite 100% approval rating, 80%, with the 20% strongly approving and 60% somewhat approving of Daniel Sunjata as moving on from the multiracial delegation to the Swana Mena, sometimes referred to as Middle Eastern North African delegation. And this is a character that was drafted as part of their dynasty and was brought into the main draft for the season. And this is Barbara Minerva, aka Cheetah. Now again, this is a character that is traditionally depicted as white. But I would say that because of the origins of this character being of the powers coming from a North African goddess, I believe. I think that there is something to um, the alter ego, Barbara Minerva, not necessarily being British of British origin. What I mean to say is British nationality, nationality, but not necessarily a British ethnicity. I think that there could be something to be gained by someone who grew up in Britain, but wanted to reclaim her heritage, and in doing so, be imbued with the powers of an African god. So I think that's an interesting element that can be added to the character, and I think that's a reason that the character could work as a Swana equivalent with the race band. And again, possibly shockingly, 100% approval rating for Swana Cheetah. 33.3 strongly approve, and 66.7 somewhat approve. There was also a fan cast that was presented. Nikhar Zedigan. I apologize if I, did not pronounce her name correctly. She's British. Speaks many languages. I those who may watch Picard in the Star Trek universe might know her very well as I think Picard's love interest. And I mean, I definitely think she could portray the role of a scientist, and she has the size and physicality. She's also been in some action roles, so I think that she could definitely fit the role and portray it very well. And the people agree with me. 2% approval rating with 50 strongly approving and 50 somewhat approving. So good on her. And getting into the home stretch, the final two of the final picks of the round. But this one's always been a struggle for me. Now, this is a character that was drafted by the Native American delegation in a previous season 5 actually. But this is Akihiro, Wolverine's son. Uh, he's been known as Daken. He's also been known as Fang. But now he is currently in Marvel. He's the Wolverine. He was killed recently and came back to life with a spirit of vengeance to go along with his Wolverine-esque claws and feral abilities. This is like, as I said before, traditionally he's been of mixed ethnicity, and in fact, Yakihiro is a Japanese name, and Daken is a Japanese word for mongrel. It's essentially, it's a derogatory term for mixed people, and I think that's one of the reasons that it's always been difficult to swear this drafted for the Native American delegation, as such, because so much of his identity is him being either Japanese or of mixed Japanese origin. So, not surprised that the approval rating is only at 50%. 16.7 strongly approving, 33.3 somewhat approving, 16.7 somewhat disapproving, and 33.3 strongly disapproving of Akihiro in the Native American delegation. But it's an interesting character that's been getting a lot of recent push as of late. So again, as part of the Wolverine, we'll potentially see big things with this character fall. And that brings us to the final pick of the round. This is another character that has been dynasty drafted that's coming over to the fold. Luke Thomas, the Signal. He used to be a Robin in the We Are Robin series, more crudely thought of as the Black One. However, I mean that's what he is. He's the only black person to have worn the mantle of Robin. He also has transitioned away from the Robin identity to the Signal identity. He is a metahuman. Kind of wonky in terms of his powers. I call him the Light Knight because he does often operate in the daytime as opposed to the rest of the Bat family that operates at night. He has a modified Batman logo, and more recently, he's been working alongside the next Batman, the Black Batman, Jace Fox. Does remain to be seen whether that relationship will continue. I think it might, and it's going to be interesting to see what the future holds for Duke Thomas. As of now, he's been appearing a little bit more, very much in the Wayne Family Adventures webcomic, where he's basically been the co-lead for this current season. And of course, like I said before, he's been lately working alongside Jace Fox, and I think he's going to have a prominent role in the Power Company series, which just sort of got rolling in DC Comics. So, now's a good time to sort of invest in that Duke Thomas stock. We don't know yet if he will be coming over to another medium. I do not believe that he's actually shown up in any kind of animated series or in any kind of live action. So that is still a further level to be unlocked for the character. So as of now, he's really only been in one media, but there's potential for him to expand into other media. And when that happens, the Black delegation will be there to capitalize, hopefully. Unless one of the other delegations gets in there in a subsequent season and snatches him out of the fold. But that's what we do with the racial draft. You have to manage your assets. So, when there are some characters that are characters of color, you have to figure out where they fit in the hierarchy as far as the total characters you draft in the season, and of course the characters that you draft for the long term in the dynasty draft. Speaking of the dynasty draft, by the time you listen to this podcast, it will have kicked off the round 8 dynasty draft where these characters will be held indefinitely. So pay attention to that. Follow along with us and follow on Instagram, on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on YouTube. Stay abreast with all the racial draft shenanigans wherever you can. Try to cast your votes, like and subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast in audio form, go ahead and subscribe to us here and keep the party rolling. But I'm not going to keep your attention for too much longer. Follow us at all the usual places, and hopefully you'll be here with us next week. Same race time, same race channel, where we racially draft. Go next time. All things are possible.